I didn't think I'd ever want to do a top 5 anything on my channel, but to be honest, as I was messing around with a hypothetical list in my head, it was pretty fun internally debating which titles I'd include and how systematic I wanted to be about it. As a spoiler, I'm not. There's no system, and much of it is just based on my own enjoyment and connection to the titles and how often I replay the game. I know these lists are everywhere and a little corny, but again, they're kind of fun. I know this shouldn't need to be stated, but any game that doesn't get included in my top 5 doesn't mean it should be read as a condemnation of its quality or how high or low I value the game's message. This is very personal and highly subjective. I definitely encourage you to add thoughts or even take some subtle jabs if you're shocked that I didn't include a particular title. But mostly, I just wanted this to be a fun diversion from my reviews and character studies, and I do plan to do more, and any ideas would be welcome. So Terranigma was a title I knew very little about when I reviewed it several years ago. I had only seen it in passing as a kid and was pretty disinterested, and as it turns out, maybe I was a bit of a dumb kid, because Terranigma instantly seized my attention and never let go. Its immediately addictive and rewarding and smooth action-based combat system just grabs you, even before the player has a chance to process how truly genius the game's thrust is and how human and moving the storytelling is. I really did not expect a goat to move me the way it did in Terranigma, or for a seemingly vengeful child to tell a story of how impossible it can be to cope with great sadness and grief, of how we often do destructive or awful things in order to mask or subdue sorrow, of our connection to nature and the world in general, and also comments a lot on sacrifice, major sacrifice for the greater good and for rebuilding a fundamentally broken world, both literally and figuratively putting it back together. Not to mention, it's a stunning game to look at and has a stellar soundtrack. This game has firmly positioned itself in my top 5. I adore just about all of Yasumi Matsuno's work. There's a certain texture to all of his stories, political intrigue, state versus state maneuvering, an established and consistent sound courtesy of Hitoshi Sekimoto, even if Matsuno urged Sekimoto to be darker and more menacing in this game, and backroom deals that all eventually uncover much grander and non-human threats, but ironically enough, what Matsuno scrutinizes is very human. The complexities of interaction, of war, of memory, of experience, of impossible decisions with no real winners, and to be honest, even if you care very little about any of this, Vagrant Story is still a treat. The game has just a little bit of everything, from Shakespearean dialogue and references, a rhythm-based combat system, French architectural influences, French graphic novel aesthetics, and an exquisitely layered political drama with plenty of mysticism sprinkled in. Vagrant Story was an impressive accomplishment for a late PS1 title. It's far deeper and far darker than the bulk of PS1-era JRPGs, and never allows the player to ease into a familiar or comfortable routine until the second or third playthrough, which the design of the game actively encourages. Matsuno and his team truly created a world, and I can't emphasize that enough. Despite his claims of over half the story and many of the planned features being cut due to time limitations, he managed to give Lemon a complicated and tragic history that eventually becomes as important to the plot as any of the primary characters. The more the player learns about Lemon's collapse, the more heart-wrenching it becomes. While the game certainly tests your patience, and put plainly isn't going to appeal to everyone given the unique blend of elements, it's a must-play in my book. There's really no way to do the epic of Xenogears justice in a few hundred words. Tetsuya Takahashi and Soraya Saga's complicated brilliance is on full display here. A deluge of literary, philosophical, and psychological influences inform every corner of Xenogears' universe. From Jung to Nietzsche to Freud, Soraya Saga has said that Xenogears is a story about where do we come from, what are we, where are we going, and despite glaring flaws in just about all of Takahashi's projects, they never fail to deeply interrogate these questions, and to be frank, in a medium overrun with half-hearted explorations into tough subjects and on-the-nose terminology and dialogue, it's a beautiful thing to see how elegantly many of these topics are broached and how seamlessly classic problems are tackled. even if Xenosaga Episode 1 fell tragically into the jargon dump and heavy expository dialogue trap. Xenogears often avoided this. Even with the second disc's whiplash, this holds up as a brilliant piece of work, blowing most others out of the water in so many categories. Its combat is immediately immersive and encourages experimentation. The soundtrack might be the best in the genre. For my money, that head nod goes to Final Fantasy IX, but Bonds of Sea and Fire might be my favorite track ever. And a brilliantly layered and challenging story that continuously explores humanity's complications. Like many people my age, Final Fantasy VII was the game that connected me to the JRPG genre. While I'd previously messed around with some titles, nothing prepared me for what Final Fantasy VII did, for how aggressively it hooked me. And what's really magnificent about the game is that each time I replay it, I'm able to pull something else out of it. While younger me didn't really get the incisive critiques of corporatist greed and gross inequality, I was blown away by the sheer scale of Midgar and then the entire world. By a system that I could tinker around with to find broken and fun combinations in combat, by music that just left me in awe. But over the last 20 plus years, I keep finding little nuggets, little segments that shed light on how tightly and intelligently conceived this game is. How lines that I previously thought were filler or mundane had immense impact. And as most of you probably know by now, what most impresses me is how the game explores character growth, making sure to challenge early worldviews and to question unflinching ideology and extremist reactions to fundamentally broken systems. It's cliche to love Final Fantasy VII as much as I do at this point, but I'll always say that it's a game that has truly earned its position, its adoration, and its respect. There's a reason I've dedicated 3 videos, with a 4th in the works, to just Final Fantasy IX character studies. This game means a lot to me on a very personal level. Vivi's struggles with identity and purpose and grappling with existence in general hit me hard in my teenage years. Most of the characters in this game struggle with some major trauma or identity-rending crisis, with a few of course that get painfully short-shrifted. 9 hit every box I wanted checked. Medieval fantasy setting with beautiful and breathtaking backdrops. Lived in cluttered early industry cities. Intimate and precise exploration of character growth. Meaningful points about life and death. A fun, if not simple, combat system. Superbly paced intro. It just does everything that I want a JRPG to do, and it has one of the best late game sequences I've experienced. Those late game events drove home consistent and poignant themes of collective resistance, our connection to others, and how to confront death. The love put into this game is so immediately evident. At this point, it's well known that it was intended to be a love letter to fans, and that intention and goal shows in every crevice of the game. It is my favorite and highest ranking JRPG. And that about does it, guys. I had another 5 I was going to include as my runners-up, but I really like the length of this video, keeping it around 7 to 8 minutes for a top 5. If you guys are interested at all, I'll do a short video on those or just come up with a separate top 5 as sort of a fun diversion. I'm kind of ashamed to admit that I actually really enjoy this. As always, thanks for stopping by, guys.